Welcome to the latest edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm Dan Myler. With me, as always, Matt Price. And Matt, we get Ryan McDowell back to talk about the quarterbacks. We missed him last week when we spoke about those running backs.
Yeah, I don't have to do an impression this week, so we can.
Yeah, I don't think Matt missed me.
It didn't seem that way, Ryan, and welcome back to the show. I'm certainly happy to see you for sure. How do you feel about Matt's impression that you heard last week?
Well, he's barely hanging on to his job, but it's okay.
Yeah, McDowell has a little more power than he did back when we started podcasting together, Matt. So I don't know.
He's an actual boss now.
Yeah,
he was always a boss, but now he's the boss.
He's the boss.
Oh yeah,
sure.
It's a different tune this week, Matt.
Yeah, when you're not around, he sounds a lot different, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Like I said, we talked about running backs last week. Did our draft prospect primer on the position. The week before, we did the wide receiver class. We fit a lot of players in, guys. This week, we're jumping to the quarterbacks. Let's talk about these signal callers, these passers that are entering the NFL. A whole bunch of them are going to go in the first round, probably the first 10 picks of the NFL draft. Superflex owners, Superflex managers like the three of us are all very interested in these five names and maybe even dipping a little bit farther down the draft board into that second, third, and maybe even beyond that rounds of the NFL draft and these guys that we can sneak into the latter parts of our rookie draft. So let's jump into this right away. We're going to talk about this 2021 rookie class. Once again, just a open discussion on all these prospects. Before we do that, though, Ryan, I'd love to know your general thoughts on this class as a whole, because you study ADP regularly. You're watching where all these rookie classes, how they shake out. And in the past, we have that number one prospect, maybe a couple prospects in a class that dominate Superflex drafts and may even sneak into the first round of one quarterback drafts. This year, we're talking about a lot of prospects that could go in those top 10 picks, as I said before. And it may be a little bit of a different animal this year when it comes to our rookie drafts when all these names are going to come off our draft board.
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, but if you're in a Superflex league, this is an exciting time of year. It always is, but especially this year with these five quarterback prospects. You have to be excited about the class, and it's so difficult to get that young starting quarterback in a Superflex league. So to have the chance to do that, maybe even with a mid, maybe even with a late first round pick to grab one of these guys, is going to be a big opportunity to really impact some dynasty teams. And I think what we saw last year with the running back position, just with the volume of runners impacting the overall position across fantasy leagues, across dynasty leagues, I think this quarterback class could be that for that quarterback position.
Yeah, and there's so much to talk about with these guys. Matt, your thoughts on this class as a whole, and specifically those top five names. It's an exciting time, as Ryan said, to be a Superflex manager and have an opportunity to add to that depth chart at a position that means so much in those leagues.
Yeah, we'll get into it more specifically, but we think we have three extremely good prospects. This is just my opinion, of course. One with a ton of upside, but I think the floor is pretty low as well. And then we have one just kind of I don't know if we're going to call him a generic pocket passer, but when we get to Mac Jones, we'll talk about how he's very accurate. I don't know if he offers necessarily as much upside as some of the other guys in this class, but he could settle into a nice starter role at some point. So we have five really solid ones, and then a few after that are intriguing, probably as backups, but may get a shot as a starter at some point.
So before we specifically start talking of each of these prospects, Matt, we should talk a little bit about what we look for when we're scouting these guys. We did that at the running back position and then the week before at the wide receiver position. And I think it gives listeners the chance to understand what we look for. Matt, I know you like to scout players coming in. I certainly do, have been for 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years. And have gotten a little better every single year. It feels like the quarterback position to me, though, has been the one position that that I swing and miss at, maybe more than the others. It feels like you should be able to turn on tape of a player, especially at this position. And if you watch a lot of football, you should be able to tell what you like and don't like about a guy. Personally, the things I look for, I like to see those anticipatory throws, show good anticipation and lead a guy open, whether against zone, finding that hole in the zone and throwing it to him in front of the defense, filling that zone. Also in man coverage, throwing away from the defense and throwing that receiver open, making multiple reads is important. Does he avoid pressure, and can he continue to look downfield when he has pressure in his face? And then that quick release and quick decision making. Those are the things that matter a lot to me. Maybe the athletic profiles and things like that I haven't tapped into quite enough. The Jalen Hurts was a big swing and miss last year. I thought he was overdrafted and wasn't investing in him in superflex leagues. So I tried to adjust for that a little bit and not take that athleticism, hold that athleticism against some of these guys. What are your thoughts on the position, and what do you look for when scouting these quarterbacks?
It's just a really difficult position, and everybody swings and misses, Dan. I don't think we're, we're in good company in that. Even the best of the best miss on these guys. And just for me personally, I don't have any professional experience scouting quarterback. I'd say it's my weakest one. So take everything with a grain of salt. I did go through the scouting academy with Dan Hatman for running backs and wide receivers. So I feel much more comfortable with those ones. But for quarterbacks, for me, accuracy is the most important part of it. I want to see, at least a season or two over 65% completion percentage. And like all these guys that we're going to talk about at the top, hit that. You'd like to see rushing ability in today's fantasy game. You need that rushing ability to kind of have a difference maker at the quarterback position, especially in one quarterback leagues. And then in terms of what you see on the field specifically, I do like to see them be able to go through their progressions, especially things like, if their first read is going to be throwing into coverage, but the second or third read is going to be taking what the defense gives you. There are certainly opportunities and specific instances where you should be challenging the defense, but if you have a guy wide open versus a guy that's, locked down in coverage, it's nice to see them take that safer throw, right? And then, what I call is calculated downfield aggression. So I want to see them, challenge defenses deep, but do it in a way that's not necessarily going to result in a turnover. Don't throw into double, triple coverage if you have a guy open in the shorter intermediate areas of the field. So just some of those things. I guess a lot of those second and third things kind of come back to the accuracy part of the equation. So that kind of bakes in a lot of it for me.
Yeah, and so many college prospects come out with and they haven't honed that accuracy just yet, especially downfield accuracy. This class might not necessarily be that way, though. Ryan, if there's something that you try to pinpoint when it comes to watching these guys, whether it be analytical or something that you see on film, what is it with the quarterback position?
Yeah, you kind of said you tend to maybe shy away or not give as much credence towards that athleticism. I think I'm kind of the opposite of that, although I also missed on Jalen Hurts a year ago. Yeah, I do kind of find myself chasing that athletic profile, and especially when it comes to quarterbacks who can offer something on the ground. And so many of these rookies this year do that. So that's just another thing that makes it an exciting class. But I've told you guys on here before plenty of times, I don't pretend to be a scout. Matt, I actually didn't know you did the Dan Hatman thing. That's very cool. Yeah, I've not done anything like that, but I did throw some questions out on Twitter a couple weeks ago, really asking if there was one number, if there was one stat, if there was one metric you could use to analyze these players, and I broke it down for each position, what would it be? And there were a couple consistent things with the quarterback position. One was completion percentage, specifically adjusted completion percentage. So that's something I've been looking at closely with these players. And the other thing, which sounds really obvious, is draft capital. I looked back at the past 5 years, the top 12 quarterbacks from each season. If you go all the way back to 2016, 5 of the top 12 quarterbacks were first rounders. Not necessarily all that impressive. That number has grown every year since. The past 2 years, 9 of the top 12 fantasy quarterbacks have been former first round draft picks. So it's not quite as simple as saying chase draft capital, but it's close to that. Of course, this year we know we're going to have at least 5 players that are first rounders. So differentiating between those guys will be the challenge.
Yeah, big challenge for sure. And when I spoke of that athleticism maybe being something that I overvalued or undervalue now, I think I got sucked in years back by the athletic quarterback and the Marcus Mariotas of the world, and falling in love with those prospects and thinking that floor that running provides make them can't miss. Maybe because I missed on those guys, then I started thinking too much about that and thought I overvalued it at one point. So now undervaluing it is another thing. A bunch of these guys are athletic, even though they profile well as pocket passers as well and read defense as well. And let's get into these guys because it is, as we've said so many times already, an exciting class. There's no matter what you like in a quarterback, you can find your flavor, find your guy at the top of the draft. And we might as well start at the 101 in Superflex drafts and in the NFL draft for sure. That's Trevor Lawrence, Clemson quarterback. Just, the exciting, worthy of the 101 type pick that people have been salivating over for so many years. Ryan, you play in Devy leagues. I know, Matt, you do too as well. I do. And Lawrence, when he came into college football, was a top recruit, top player that we were all chasing. Ideal size, pocket passer with so much rushing upside, has that Aaron Rodgers feel outside the pocket to push the ball down the field, keeps his eyes up even when he's moving inside and outside the pocket. Throws a great deep out route, so has the powerful arm and drives through the ball like you like to see out of these top-end quarterbacks. Changes plays at the line of scrimmage, makes multiple reads, does really everything right, has all the experience that we like, Matt. These guys that play 3+ years at a big college program and dominate at that level, they're supposed to translate instantly to the NFL. He appears to be an all-pro type player, a player that can carry a dynasty team, certainly worthy of that 101 pick in those super flex drafts. Trevor Lawrence is if there is a can't-miss prospect at the quarterback position, it feels like it's him.
Yeah, and there's not, we probably don't even need to spend a whole lot of time on him. He's a great prospect. There's no real downside to his game. All of the things that you mentioned, timing, anticipation, throws, he's absolutely just deadly as a pocket passer. When he has time in the pocket, he'll just pick apart the defense. I really don't have anything to nitpick with him. One thing that I thought was interesting, we're in April and we're getting kind of bored with prospects when we really start to nitpick. You start seeing people say things like questioning his competitive. So you see that video of him coming out playing basketball. Like, no, he's plenty competitive. I just think if you compare like his lofty expectations and where he is as a prospect in terms of how people think about it and how he projects himself, you do see some humbleness there, some humility. And that's something you really like to see in these top prospects, because it shows that, while they are as good as we could possibly hope they can be, they're still open to learning more. And they're not going to be that kind of know-it-all that's going to come in and think they know everything about the NFL game when they do. So in addition to everything you see on the field, he has those off the field intangible kind of things too that you like to see.
Ryan, you, as I said earlier, you watch all that ADP. You're part of the ADP process, and you look at every draft closely. There aren't going to be a lot of super flex drafts where he's not the 101 this season. People are going to be building their dynasty rosters around Trevor Lawrence for good reason.
Yeah, for sure. I think when you have that slam dunk 101, like Trevor Lawrence is, you start to try to go big picture. I remember doing the same thing with Saquon Barkley. We knew he was going to be the 101 in those rookie drafts. So instead of trying to compare him maybe to other players in the class or where he might fall, really looking at the overall ranks, I think is probably gives us more information. So comparing Lawrence, where Lawrence is going in dynasty startup drafts, I think is more interesting. He's already certainly locked in as a top 10 quarterback. He's our QB9 in our April data. That's one quarterback startup drafts. In Superflex startup drafts, he's quarterback 7, which is exactly where I would have him if I were ranking him today with those veterans. And then I think the other interesting component, we saw this last year with Joe Burrow, is where does he go in one quarterback rookie drafts? And I think he's a first rounder. We saw Joe Burrow sneak in with a late first round ADP a year ago in what could probably be called a deeper overall class. And I think Lawrence is certainly worthy of a late first round pick even in one quarterback leagues.
That's an interesting conversation to have, Ryan, because we've talked about the running backs and the receivers, and I think I can speak for all of us. There are a lot of guys to be excited about in this class. Haven't even gotten to Kyle Pitts, who should be a number one pick in rookie drafts as well. Come off those first 12 picks, a first rounder for sure. Matt, I definitely want to get your opinion on this. Ryan said you think that he thinks Lawrence is that first round guy, a guy that can fall in those first 12 picks in your single quarterback rookie draft. Where do you have him? I have him just outside at 13, but I certainly think that I wouldn't be angry with anybody for saying he's among the top 12 or even taking him in the top 10.
Yeah, I think he is a top 10. I think there's 8 to 9 really solid prospects, ahead of him. I mean, if you really wanted to get into the weeds, like I think there's, two prospects in Pitts and Chase that are the ones that we have that we don't have really any questions about, too many questions about. And then, I think we have that guy at quarterback with Lawrence. So depending on where you have him with those guys, I think 9 or 10 is totally reasonable. And if you get him at 112, I think that's like, if you're let's say you're somebody who won the championship last year, you're rolling with, a bunch of old quarterbacks like I am, Fitzpatrick or Cam and all these guys kind of playing committee, like at the end of the first round, like why not take a shot on your quarterback for, we say for the next decade. Obviously that's a little bit overstated the way we trade in dynasty leagues and things like that, but that's the kind of prospect you're getting here. And there's no reason not to do that that late in the draft. It's a luxury pick for a championship contender team. So there's really no reason not to.
Well, there've been so many comparisons and so much hype with Lawrence, going back basically his entire college career. And if you're really into Devy or recruiting or something like that, of course, him even further beyond that. I think we're going to see Lawrence in some leagues, and probably not the leagues we play in, but he's going to be a top 2 or 3 pick in one quarterback leagues because of what you just said, Matt. People are looking at him as, I'm going to lock him in. He's going to carry me for the next decade. I won't have to worry about the position. And I mean, I think that's personally a little flawed, but I get the idea, I get the thinking behind it at least.
Yeah, definitely in those local leagues, you will see that, and it wouldn't even be shocking to hear about him going first overall because he's that big a prospect and has been known for that long. The last one, and everybody likes to compare Lawrence to Andrew Luck. Back when Luck was a rookie, he went number 1 overall in single quarterback leagues in some places, and some shook their head and some said, hey, look at the career he had and how dominant he was for fantasy football. That could be the path for Trevor Lawrence as well. So his ADP right now is at 10 in those rookie drafts, 9.4. So 10 overall. He's going to be a first rounder, certainly going to be the next quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he's going to do a lot for their offense, and hopefully the skill players that are there support him so he can get off to a really good start in his career. We should move on to the next guy on the list because coming off the board at 14, according to our rookie ADP, is Justin Fields. There's so much, Matt, you mentioned it, going around right now. You get the negative publicity. And when you think of Fields, he is the poster boy for it this year. It seems like every week there's somebody on Twitter or somebody on ESPN, somewhere on social media, just bashing Fields and his game or his competitiveness or if he has the ability to carry an offense and all these things. And I just continue to go back to watching him play in those playoff games at the end of 2020 and seeing that competitiveness. He's so driven. He's playing through those injuries and threw that team on his back and looks so good doing it. His ball placement is good when he throws from a clean pocket. When he has people around his legs, when he gets defenders in his face, he can get a little bit erratic, but that's normal from a from a youthful quarterback, from a guy coming into the NFL. He's pretty poised under pressure, although he does tend to flutter some passes with guys in his face. He's got that strong arm, makes plays down the field when he's outside the pocket, known as an athletic guy, but really is better when he's looking down the field, when he breaks containment and when he gets on the outside. He will pick up a first down with his legs on third down when you need him, which is awesome, and that certainly will help in the fantasy game. Needs to work on his sliding game, though, a little bit. If there were some negatives, Matt, for him, I think he moves into pressure a little bit inside the pocket, takes too many sacks because of it. That is going to irk some NFL coaches and potentially cause problems with either fumbling or lost possessions, which is certainly a negative in the NFL game. Has the long release, the ball's in his hand for a long time. That may show where he's going with the football a little bit more. Not drastically, not the worst you've ever seen, but it's something that you do notice when you watch him make those throws down the field in particular. And then if there's anything else, it's probably that he stays on that primary receiver a little bit too long at times. A lot of times in that Ohio State offense, which is very quarterback friendly, there are those drag mesh route concepts, and the ball is supposed to go to this specific receiver on the drag. And if the defense is playing for that, they can take that away, and he just sticks with it a little bit too long before moving down the field and looking for that alternate receiver, that secondary read. Matt, when you watch Fields, what really jumps off to you other than those things, I guess?
Yeah, mentioned completion percentage being very important for. He has he over 67% passing in all of his seasons combined. 66 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 68.4% in 2019 and 2020 combined. Carries for 867 yards, 15 touchdowns. I found another stat that he has the highest depth of target and the highest depth of completion in his vertical offense there at Ohio State. They really like to push the ball downfield. And another stat that I found very interesting. I think I heard this on Sharp Football. Forgive me if I'm wrong about that. But 35% of his yards. 35% of his completion yards came after the catch, after the receiver caught the ball, which was one of the lowest rates in all of college football. So in the NFL, where we have all these playmakers, especially ends up going to a Kyle Shanahan system, he's going to have a lot more of that in the NFL. So there's a lot more there. As a rusher, he ran a 4.4 40. Only RG3 and Michael Vick ran it faster. Lamar Jackson didn't run an official 40, so you can say maybe he was faster than him. So he's got all of that. You mentioned inconsistent in terms of going against impressions. Yeah, I mean, you see that sometimes, and but you can see also on film that he is doing that. So so let's look at a play here. You mentioned the Clemson game. I have a couple that I wanted to show. This one shows kind of his advanced passing a little bit. So this particular play is the touchdown, the post to Chris Olave. But you can see, and I'm going to have to show this from a couple different angles because I don't have the all 22. But so from the first part of the play here, you see him, he takes the snap and he's looking off to his right. You can't see it, but there's two high safeties up here. And he's looking off to the right. I forget the wide receiver down here at the bottom of the screen. But he's looking the whole way, and those safeties, they come off the ball, and then immediately comes back and throws that post to Olave right down the center. And look at that accuracy. I mean, that's a 60-yard touchdown throw. This is a different angle, a little bit angle, so you can actually see these safeties back here. And on this one, you can actually see that. So he's looking right, circumcised those two safeties right there on the corner. They're watching him the whole way, and as he's looking to the right, he gets them to open up those hips to that side, and as he comes down the play like that, they're already running towards that outside receiver because that's where he's looking, right? And then Olave just comes in behind on that post, and by that time, it's too late for them to flip around and catch him. So I think he does show some of those advanced techniques of looking off receivers like that and kind of manipulating the defense just with his eyes and his body language, right? One question, he has questionable throws too, so I have another one coming up here. Just so we got to show both sides of the coin, right? So he's going to try to throw a touchdown here into a lot of coverage. Meanwhile, he has a kind of a wide open receiver, I think. And I think the wide open one is Ruckert. So he's going to throw it, this again on all 22, but you can see he's throwing to the corner here, and there's already two defenders there. Two of them are looking at his man. I think that's Olave again. And then you have another corner down, or another defensive back down here, kind of watching the ball, right? And into that coverage, and that's an easy pickoff for that guy. Not only is it short, but it's into coverage. And then if we see it from another angle coming up, you can see that Ruckert is pretty much wide open in the middle of the field. So here's the end zone angle. So he's going to come, and you can see Rucker breaks over. He's kind of open now, but then he's going to break back to the middle of the field. He's wide open there. This is a third down play, and Rucker's a few yards short of the line of scrimmage, so maybe that's why. And they're already up big at this point. But you can see if he takes the Rucker option there, that's easy first down. It could be a touchdown, depending on what he does with that with defender. But instead, he elects to go over the corner. So you do see some inconsistencies. I think this is one of the ones you were talking about, Dan, where he's going to lock onto his primary read a little bit when there's maybe a better play that he could make. But I think all young quarterbacks are going to do this, right? He wants to make the big play. They're already up big. Why not try to tack on some extra on top of that? So a little bit of inconsistency, but obviously athletic as all hell, and he can throw a 60-yard pass in a bucket downfield to a receiver after looking off the other defenders to create that help the receiver create that separation. So I don't know. We're nitpicking, right? He's a fantastic prospect, both through the air and on the ground. So he's the 102 in most leagues. I think he's in the same tier for me with a guy we're going to talk about in a little bit, but there's no argument with him at 102 in the Superflex.
Ryan, what are your thoughts? And Matt displayed some of that, some of the strengths and weaknesses of Fields, and really what so many of us have been looking at for so long now. When it comes to Fields and his upside in these Superflex leagues, even in the single quarterback leagues, how do you feel about him being a guy that we can depend on down the road, being our top option at the position?
I think it comes down to what you already mentioned, Dan. Sometimes it's as simple as just watching the games and seeing these guys perform. The slow processor label has been thrown around a lot with Fields. I remember the same thing was said about Lamar Jackson. And that hasn't really bothered him. If he's a slow processor, it's been just fine so far, especially when it comes to fantasy production. So, I guess one thing that I'm kind of happy about, honestly, is that looking back at all of our rookie data, looking at our startup mock draft data, our ADP, Fields has remained the quarterback 2 in this class, despite all of this junk. Honestly, I think that's what it is. I don't know if we're overanalyzing or if there's something deeper going on, but Fields to me is. I mentioned this on Twitter. I think he's closer to Trevor Lawrence than he is to Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, whoever else you want to put next in line. So he's easily the quarterback 2 and the 1.02 in these Superflex leagues. And again, looking big picture, he's basically already being valued as a fringe QB1 in startup drafts as well. He's been the quarterback 12, quarterback 13, somewhere in that range in our ADP, even going back to February.
We talked about the pedigree of Trevor Lawrence and how when he came into big-time college football, he was already being seen as the next big thing, the next quarterback that was going to take over the NFL draft and be a sure 101. Well, when we were talking about him back then, it was like, yeah, but there's this Fields kid too. He's pretty darn good. And if there's somebody that's going to give him a run for his money for that king status in this class, it's probably him. You're right. He stuck as close as he could throughout this process. And there are a lot of people still that say they, like you, he's way closer to number 1 than he is to number 3. Personally, I have another quarterback at number 2, but we'll get to him here in just a minute, and they are real close to me. I really think there are 3 really, really, really good quarterbacks in this class. Let's talk about that number 3 guy according to April ADP, Ryan. That's Zach Wilson out of BYU, kind of I don't know what you'd call him, like a late bloomer, I guess. He really came on in 2020, came out of nowhere for a lot of people. I remember the first time I watched him play was late in BYU's 2020 season, and they were talking about him as a draft prospect, maybe even a potential first-round pick, and I thought, yeah, he's showing some of that stuff right now at number 20 overall in our rookie ADP, so looking like that second-round option, the third guy off the board in most of these drafts. Ryan, he has a quick release, especially on slants and tunnel screens. He gets the ball out of his hands really, really quick. Powerful zip on throws down the field. He likes to hit his tight ends and slot receivers on those seam routes at BYU, and you can see the power behind the ball. Stands in the pocket well, delivers it on time. A downfield playmaker like Fields outside the pocket is looking to push the ball down the field, especially when he breaks that containment, protects the football, but knows when to give those one-on-one chances down the field. You see him throw those 50-50 balls, has a couple of those receivers that can win those at BYU and gave him those opportunities. He reads defense as well. Good timing on his throws. He does take some risks. He throws the ball into coverage from time to time, and especially when the rush is in his face. But really overall, he's athletic. And he has such a big arm that he's exciting to watch. And he's one of those guys that's maybe a high risk, low floor kind of player. He misses high in the middle of the field and he misses low on the outside, which is not a good thing to do for sure. Reminds me so much, Ryan, of Jay Cutler. He is Jay Cutler to me, which you can take that as a good or a bad. A lot of people will probably say, ouch, that's a bad thing. But there were things about Cutler's game that everybody loved. He has those types of things. Hopefully he doesn't take those risky throws to the level that Cutler did, because that kind of ruined him, especially in Chicago. What are your thoughts on Zach Wilson, who right now is the number 3 quarterback according to our ADP? Number 2 quarterback in most mock drafts. Most people have him going to the Jets at number 2. Where do you have him?
He's a little further down. He's probably quarterback 4 for me at this point.
Me too.
And yeah, this class is so interesting. We've got the 5 prospects that are going to be first rounders, but 3 of those players are basically 1-year starters in college. Or 1 year of big production, I should say. And in the case of Mac Jones, who we'll talk about soon, we understand why. Obviously, he was playing behind Tua. In Trey Lance's case, we understand why he opted out this past season. But with Zach Wilson, the production that we saw this year is just so vastly different from his previous 2 seasons. And I know there was an injury in his sophomore season, but just looking at some of these numbers, even just the counting stats, right? The touchdowns, 32 touchdowns this year, 11 the previous year, 12 the year before that. Yards per attempt, which is that's another one of those numbers that showed up that fantasy players are really looking at closely when it comes to these quarterbacks. 11 yards per attempt. This past season, which ranks in the 97th percentile. Obviously, that's a big and impressive number, but 7.4 the year before, 8.6 as a freshman. And then his PFF grade, which I think is, PFF gets knocked sometimes, but I think they bring a lot to the table and give us some important information. 95.4 this past season, 76.2, 80.5 the previous 2. So, I don't know if we want to call him a 1-year wonder, but I honestly kind of feel better about the players like Mac Jones and Trey Lance, who we really only saw 1 year from them, but that 1 year was elite and impressive. So I don't know. There's just some concern for me. You mentioned the Jay Cutler comp, Dan. I've also seen multiple people make a Johnny Manziel comp, and that doesn't make me feel too good either.
Oh boy. Okay, we're really on a roll here, Matt. Maybe you can get us back on track with Zach Wilson, because if he's Cutler and Manziel, we're in trouble for sure, and maybe the Jets would be as well if that in fact is what happens at number 2 on the board. You mentioned that you have him at number 4, so push down a little bit farther than maybe some others in the Dynasty community. What worries you about Wilson, and then what are the strengths of his that maybe you see as something that could give him that high ceiling?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily see. I mean, I could see Cutler now that you mention it, but like maybe a more athletic Cutler.
Yeah.
He's got that DGAF in him, right? He's just gonna throw it. He's so confident in his abilities that he's gonna throw it in. You see him throw it into triple coverage sometimes while there's wide open receivers. You see him throw it back, like kind of do this little jump and throw the ball back across his body that I think is just not going to work in the NFL. Like those windows are going to be so much tighter in the NFL. So those things really concern me. I did want to mention though, also in this outlier Caesar in 2020, 73.5% accuracy, a completion percentage. We did have two other seasons, like I think Ryan mentioned 60%, 62% in the other two seasons, but that big outlier, 10% jump in this most recent season. So I'm going to highlight this play here. I wanted to show this play against Houston. This one is actually a play that works out, and so maybe I'm nitpicking, but I do want to show you what I see here. So this is against Houston, and this is going to be a flea flicker kind of play that's going to create what looks like some separation on the outside for a player coming out of the backfield right here. But I want you to keep an eye, especially on the second view of the number 15 right here. I apologize, I don't know his name off the top of my head. It's going to be a flea flicker play. Wilson's going to take the snap, hand it off to this guy, hand it off to that guy, throw it back. So he's clearly locked on the outside at the bottom of the screen, right? He's ready to throw it there. He throws it, and the receiver is going to make the catch. But we talk about his big arm, but this is an underthrown ball. He had to step on his defender earlier in the play, and now he's going to have to slow down and come back to the ball. And he is able to come up and grab the play, so it works out. It's a highlight play, gets him into the end zone or whatever. But if we back up just a hair from the beginning again, you'll see. Look at the top of the screen on this throw. Look at where 15 is. There's nobody around him at all. He's up here all by himself saying, "Hey, throw me the ball. I have a walk-in touchdown." But he goes to the guy that's covered. So that's that part of it. And then if you look back from the other view, from the end zone view, you can see it even clearer here. You'll see 15 come out of the corner here. There he is, breaking away, and there's basically nobody out in front of him at all at this point. If he throws it right now, he's got a wide open guy. If he throws it even a little bit later, he's already in the end zone, but instead chooses to go over and take the covered guy, right? So that's a questionable play. It worked out for him. He has a lot of these plays where I think it works out fine in college, but at the NFL, I'm just not so sure that that's going to be as popular with coaches. I have one more play here that does demonstrate something that you do like to see with Zach Wilson, and he does have some touch on the ball. So this play against Troy, he's going to be throwing a touchdown to the left side of the field here, and he comes out of takes the snap and comes out, and then you're going to see him. You really like to see, because when you're a right hand quarterback and you're running to the left, you really have got to flip those hips around to be able to get enough juice on the ball to get it into a tight window. And he puts some touch on it and is able to get it up and over this defender, and then right underneath the catch this ball right there. So those are the kind of things that he pulls out. And I think that's why, a lot of scouts are so high on him, and why he's going to probably be the number 2 pick, because he does display, the ability to make throws like this, but he's just so inconsistent with them, and he takes so many risks. For me, he's that quarterback 4. And I don't think he necessarily offers as much rushing upside as the other two quarterbacks, Fields and Lance, who we're going to talk about next. So, some really good things to see with Wilson for sure, but I think he's going to be a project quarterback. He's going to have to be hidden for his first couple of seasons in the league, I think, depending on where he goes. If he does it with the Jets, you see the coaching staff coming over from San Francisco, so they do have those concepts from Kyle Shanahan. But, I think early on in his career, until he gets those things cleaned up, he's going to be more of kind of in the background and hopefully not the featured part of the offense.
There are certainly things, and you showed them there, to like about Wilson, and the big arm, and what you mentioned, the underthrown pass. It's interesting. That's a game that I watched every throw that he made, and it was a lot of that. The best of the best was Zach Wilson, and then some head scratching plays, and that's what you're going to have to. I think that's what you meant there, Matt. You're going to have to live with, especially early on, if he's on the field. There is certainly upside when it comes to Wilson, though. Let's move on to Easton Stick, who is, according to our ADP, he's the number 4 quarterback at 21.0 ADP, 23 overall, comes out of North.
Did you say Easton Stick?
Oh, Man, there's a blast from the past. Let's move on to the replacement for Easton Stick a couple of years ago. That's Trey Lance. Easton Stick, by the way, is an NFL quarterback. So the NDSU has 3 of them in the league, which not a lot of colleges can say. Anyway, Lance out of NDSU, another 1-year starter, like you mentioned there, Ryan. 6'4", 224, has the small hands, 16th percentile there. So if we had the combine, that would have been a thing that everybody would have talked about for a couple of days. But of course, Joe Burrow, he proved that wrong a year ago with the 9-inch hands. I'll let one of you guys go first on Trey Lance. I personally have him second in the class, so I'm a little higher than some on him. I'm excited about his blend of athleticism and in-pocket abilities, how he protects the ball. Ryan, what are your thoughts when it comes to Lance and his upside at the next level?
I think his upside might be, I don't know, I feel like we say this for we could say this for Lawrence, we could say this for Fields, but his upside might be as high as anybody in this class. The floor is probably, probably as low as well. There's obvious concerns about the level of competition. We already talked about him only playing 1 year, but again, just watching him, and I know he's not playing against the Big Ten or the SEC like some of these guys, but just the way he throws the ball, the zip on the ball, it feels like I was watching a video game or some type of, I don't know, some type of animation or something. It did not feel like it was even a real, those games were even real. So it's with Lance, it's obviously going to come down to landing spot, like it will for most of these guys. We feel like we know where Lawrence and Wilson are going, and then it's a little bit of a mystery after that. I've heard a lot of people call Trey Lance a project, and I'm not sure I even see that. I think he might be as ready as Mac Jones or as Wilson to come in on day one and start and see some real playing time. So I hope that's what we get. He has been gaining a little bit of value when we look at our ADP. He's up to quarterback 3 in our Superflex rookie ADP. That's behind, of course, Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. And he's in that mid-range of a quarterback 2. So quarterback 16, between quarterback 16 and quarterback 20 in our startup ADP. I think a year from now, that's going to look like a really nice value.
Yeah, it really feels like that to me as well. And you mentioned the draft capital and that landing spot being important factors when it comes to valuing Lance and his ultimate upside. I'm pretty excited about him being a top 5 pick. I think if any of these quarterbacks belong in that top 5, he certainly does as well. Matt, what are your thoughts when it comes to Lance? Smaller school prospect, of course, but big upside.
Yeah, he's my quarterback too, Dan. I mean, he's basically tied with Fields for me. He's in that same tier. 28 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in 2019, 67% completion percentage, 169 carries for 1,100 yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. He also had the highest yards per attempt of these top 5 that we're talking about. You can see him throw. I think we're done with the videos, but there is you can see his show the touch accuracy on a 55-yard just bucket throw against Butler, which I think it was his first game as a starter. And he shows advanced skills like looking off defenders and going through the progression before coming back to the first read in that same game. And it's just like he seems like he's ready to go, even though we've only seen 1 year for him. I know we had the one game in 2020, and he wasn't that impressive in that, and then he opted out for the rest of the season. But from what we saw, I mean, that it's just super impressive. He shows poise when the play breaks down. He just looks comfortable in the pocket, where like Zach Wilson kind of looks like he's rushing everything, especially when the blitzers get there. You see Trey Lance just standing there, with the hand in his face, making the plays downfield. In Western Illinois, against Western Illinois, you see him he has a one-on-one on the outside, and he's able to hold the safety from pursuit just by looking in the middle of the field until just before he throws it. the other thing I really like about him is he has a lot of experience under center, which is not something that some of the other quarterbacks, especially in this top 5 we're talking about, a lot of shotgun and pistol from those players. So he's going to be able to do that in the NFL already. He's already going to have experience doing that. And then as a rusher, he's like a running back as once he has the ball in his hand in the open field. He bounces off tackers. You see him stiff arm guys. There was a play against James Madison where he took the ball about 50-yard touchdown run. And when you watch it, the play doesn't look super impressive because there is a big hole there. But I saw a stat from a guy, I believe at Harris Football, I forget his name, but it was he reached 21.54 miles per hour on that run. So while you say, oh, he's not going to be able to do that against NFL defenses because of the holes aren't going to be as big or whatever you want to say there, if you compare that particular speed to the NFL, it was the fastest quarterback play of any NFL quarterback in 2020 and the 12th fastest of any ball carrier in the NFL. So he's got speed for days. He's big. He's strong. I mean, there's not a whole lot to not like there, except for we have 1 year of production from him, right? 1 year that we've actually seen him play. And in terms of like comparing him against Zach Wilson, you can also kind of almost say that Trey Lance maybe is a little bit too conservative. You know, he does like to see the open receiver. You can tell that by the 0 interceptions he threw, right? He likes to be safe with the ball, but that doesn't mean he's not aggressive downfield. Like I said, he is the highest yards per attempt of the entire class. So, he's a great prospect. He's my number 2 overall. If I have the 102 pick, I'm probably going to take him over Fields, depending on where the 2 land. You know, if Fields does go to San Francisco, like we think is going to happen, and Lance falls down the board a little bit or ends up sitting behind a veteran for a season and maybe has less of an opportunity in 2021, then maybe you make an argument for Fields over Lance. But if they both go to equal situations, it's going to be Lance for me.
It will for me as well. And you mentioned Fields is getting a lot of the headlines maybe as the next guy off the board at number 3 to San Francisco. I think Lance fits perfectly with Shanahan. I feel like he's going to be the pick there, and he fits that exactly what Shanahan wants to do to give them the run pass option and open up that offense like he'd like. Not that Fields wouldn't, but it really does feel like people maybe look at, I don't know why they look at Lance as an athletic quarterback. They don't look at him as necessarily a playmaking athletic quarterback, a guy that can make big plays with his legs. It feels like he's seen as can get outside the pocket and gain a few yards with his legs. I think he's going to take the league by storm, honestly. I live up here in NDSU country. I guess I'm really in South Dakota State University country, their rival, but I see a lot of this NDSU stuff. I remember the first time I watched him play, and I mentioned Easton Stick earlier. I wonder why Trey Lance wasn't starting over Easton Stick that year, because Easton Stick is a good quarterback and he was the older guy, but Lance was on campus and he could have played that year. I can't believe he didn't outplay him, because he's so good and he can make all the multiple reads, and he has all that accuracy on the run. He is the most accurate quarterback on the run in this class. Some people will say that's crazy with Trevor Lawrence there, but I think he's more accurate, especially on intermediate balls and when receivers are working their way back to him in coverage. He is incredibly accurate. He feathers throws between linebackers and safeties. Matt, what you mentioned there, that he hesitates to throw into defense at times, he's maybe overly protective of the football. That isn't necessarily a great thing, especially at the NFL level. We can't have him not throwing to guys that have a half a step, as he did at NDSU at times. So he'll have to get over that. As long as he does, and maybe the arm strength is a little bit of a question compared to when you watch him right next to a guy like Fields. Then you say, oh, he doesn't rip it quite like Fields, but that's a critique or seen by too many people as a weakness, because there are other throws where you watch him just rip it into the seam and hit guys on slants, and you say, oh, okay, there it is. He needs to grow into his body just a little bit more, it seems like, and maybe use his whole body to make those throws when he really has to put a lot of speed on the football. But dual threat athletes that throw the ball as accurately as him are hard to find. Like Trevor Lawrence is one of them. And then the next one is Trey Lance. And that's why he's number 2 for me. I'm taking him at 2 as well. I might take him at at 2, even if Fields goes to San Francisco, as you said there, Matt. If Lance has a nice landing spot, even it's going to be hard for me to resist going after Trey Lance for sure.
What if he goes? I mean, not that it's going to happen, but what if he goes to Atlanta and sits behind Ryan? That's the only that kind of scenario.
I don't think that couldn't happen. That's definitely a possibility and something that may happen. That would be some cold water on the Trey Lance fire for sure.
That's the scenario I was thinking of when, if he's going to go someplace to sit behind. I mean, it could be 2 years behind Matt Ryan, right? So that for dynasty purposes, that's a little bit.
I'm always thinking about who's the move, like the Broncos move up to 4.
Yeah,
that would be with those weapons. Oh my gosh, Trey Lance in Denver would be amazing. He'd be the number 2 for sure. For me, I personally though, Lance seems like a Shanahan quarterback and a guy that he wants in that offense. I think he's going to be the pick at number 3, which makes Justin Fields a bargain wherever he ends up, of course. Yeah. We have one more big quarterback to talk about. We're kind of running out of time, guys. There's one more first rounder, and it is Mac Jones out of Alabama. Ryan, he's another guy that kind of came out of nowhere and a little bit because of Tua's injury a year ago, got a little bit more than a year of starting experience under his belt. A little more athletic than people maybe give him credit for. He did run a 4.68 40, which is in the 78th percentile, had a nice broad jump that put him in the 76th percentile, and a 3-cone of 7.04. That's in the 67th percentile. So if you watched him at all, you've seen him pick up a first down here and there and scramble outside the pocket and make a throw from time to time. I don't think long-term he seems like that athletic quarterback, but he can move around in the pocket, accurate, as Matt said in the opening. He's accurate at all 3 levels, has good pocket awareness, anticipates those throwing windows. But all of that said, he wasn't asked to read defenses all that much in that offense. There were lots of tunnel and bubble screens, and they had those elite assets or athletes on the outside at wide receiver, running back, and then in front of him, that offensive line was an NFL caliber offensive line protecting him. So there are things that we didn't get to see Mac Jones do that some of these other prospects we for sure saw. Arm strength's average, probably at best. Doesn't look comfortable on the second and third read all the time when he expects that first guy to be open on those screen passes and things like that. So Mac Jones seems like a second round type quarterback to me, maybe end of the first round type of guy for the 5th year option or whatever that might be. We're talking about him potentially getting into the top 10, Ryan, and that seems like we've pushed him up too far up this board.
Yeah, and that's obviously kind of starting to fade a little bit. I mean, sure. Matt mentioned the rumors of Fields to San Francisco, which it seems like that's kind of starting to take over. And if it's not Jones to San Francisco at 3, I do think we could see him. We could see him fall down the board, and maybe he's not a top 10, not even a top 15 guy. But I agree. I mean, you think of maybe who he reminds you of or what his ceiling in the NFL is, and it's Derek Carr or it's Andy Dalton, and those were second round picks. But teams and really the league as a whole has just become so quarterback hungry that he'll be a first rounder for sure. The numbers were obviously super impressive last year in that 1 year as a starter. You mentioned them, a lot of them already. 84.2 adjusted completion percentage. That was first in the country. His PFF grade was 95.8. That was the highest among these 5 quarterbacks that we've talked about. But you kind of have to figure out the balance of how much of that can we attribute to the best offensive playmakers in the country. Once Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle become first-round picks in a couple weeks, Alabama will be the first team ever to produce 4 first-round wide receivers that were all teammates. And I think maybe last year we started doubting Tua Tagovailoa a little bit, kind of looking at that same thing, thinking, okay, maybe it was more of Alabama, not just Tua really doing this. And now we're kind of ahead of the game doing the same thing with Mac Jones. So obviously I think the ceiling is lower than anybody else we've talked about. Probably a safe floor, but he is what he is. I think he's a late first rounder in Superflex rookie drafts.
Yeah, and he's going off the board in the third round of single quarterback leagues, middle of the third round. 29.5 is his ADP. Matt, when you watch Mac Jones, what really jumps off to you?
There's nothing necessarily bad about Mac Jones, and he is accurate. Like we said, his ball placement is great. I think he fit really good in a West Coast offense, that kind of thing. The problem for him is that there's nothing that he does that any of the four quarterbacks we have above him can't do also. You know what I mean? Maybe Wilson in terms of his decision making and things like that, but what's the difference between Justin Fields' accuracy and Mac Jones' accuracy? I would say not that big a deal, and you get all those extras with Justin Fields. So, I still think he has a chance to, Ryan said maybe not a top 15. I bet if he drops to 15 where the Patriots are taking, I bet they could take a shot on him there. So, but he could fall. Detroit's probably not taking him. Carolina is probably either going to move up or not take one since they got Sam Darnold into Denver is probably going to make a move stronger than Mac Jones, I would assume. Dallas is not taking him. The Giants are probably not taking him. The Eagles are probably not taking him. So, he could fall to 15, and New England could sit exactly where they are and still end up with a quarterback that is, if you squint, you can see maybe not the same arm strength as a guy like Matt Ryan or Kirk Cousins, but that kind of like echelon of quarterback. And if we look at dynasty rankings, after you get outside the top 12 or so, you start seeing, where he could fit in this range. We have Stafford and Baker and Tannehill and Daniel Jones, and then Cousins and Ryan. Then you get to Wentz and Goff and Carr. So you could see him settling in like the mid quarterback too, if he lands in a good spot and has a decent first season in the NFL. I wouldn't be super excited to take him in my dynasty drafts, but at the end of the first round, early second round, to get a quarterback who's potentially going to be a starter in his first season, that's pretty attractive, even comparing him against the other prospects that are available in that range.
Yeah, there are too many really good running backs and receivers for me to take him at the end of the first round in a super flex league. I'd rather push the button on one of them guys than Mac Jones, who it feels like has a ceiling that's capped, that it way lower than some of those wide receivers that are going to be on the board right there. You can get a dynamic playmaker in those spots. So I'll be passing on Jones there. I know a lot of in the dynasty community, a lot of us are saying, yeah, that's a nice value to get a fifth guy in the first round. I think he belongs closer to maybe the high to mid second round in those super flex drafts. Guys, there are a few other worthy names to talk about here at the quarterback position. There's Kyle Trask out of Florida and Kellen Mond at Texas A&M, also Davis Mills at Stanford. These guys are going in our most recent ADP. Yeah, they're third and fourth round picks. These guys are expected to be second and third and fourth round picks in the NFL draft. So, Matt, if there's somebody in this group, or maybe the Sam Ehlinger, Jamie Newman, Ian Book, Felipe Franks group, is there somebody else worth mentioning here? If you're on the clock late in a draft, super flex league, and you want to add a quarterback that you can develop in a deep league, who's that guy for you?
I actually even haven't watched the last set of four you watch. I've barely watched these next three, but from what I've seen, please take my opinion with a grain of salt. But Kellen Mond would be the guy, just because he has some rushing ability. He does seem to kind of thrive in chaos a little bit. Makes a lot of good plays on the run when he has to scramble out of the pocket. So that would be the guy for me, just because of that rushing ability and how we value that in fantasy these days.
Ryan, what do you think?
One thing I like to look at is, and I know this is out there a lot, is Bill Parcells' criteria for drafting a quarterback. So he had 7 points that he looked at. You had to be a 3-year starter, be a senior in college, graduate from college, start 30 college games, win at least 23 college games, have a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and have at least a 60% completion percentage. So I think just the way the college game and really the NFL game has changed, a lot of these players, the top players that we've talked about today, don't have a lot of those things, as far as they're not graduating. They don't wait until their senior year. But I think we can use that criteria to find some sleepers. For example, Dak Prescott was 7 for 7 on those. So looking further down the list at some of the names you mentioned, Kellen Mond, 6 out of 7. The only one he missed was the completion percentage. Ian Book
he was way better as a senior, substantially better. Like I think close to 70% as a senior.
And then Ian Book and Sam Ellinger. In general, I would not say those are players I would be chasing. I'm not sure they even get drafted, honestly, in the NFL draft. But they were both 7 for 7 on those criteria.
Yeah, guys that, it's a shame as dynasty managers, we overlook those names but Sam Ellinger had a great career at Texas. He was incredible and did so much for that program. Same thing for Ian Book. He was fun to watch at Notre Dame. In fact, I tuned into a game just because of Book, because he's a fun quarterback, has the moxie and all that stuff. He's probably going to be overlooked by dynasty managers. If there's a guy for me, it's probably still Kyle Trask. And I know that's probably not in vogue right now, not the thing to say. There's a lot of negatives when it comes to Trask in his game, but he's got all the size and the arm strength. He is the prototypical size, arm strength type of quarterback, stands in the pocket, looks like an NFL quarterback. Really, really good accuracy outside the pocket, although he doesn't get out there all that much. Throws an excellent deep ball. But he struggles against the blitz, and he gets baited into interceptions and pass breakups, which isn't a good thing, doesn't translate well to the NFL. If he can clean some of that stuff up, because he's super slow, has no athleticism, has a little bit of awareness in the pocket to get out of pressure, if he really needs to become better at reading defenses, and he might be able to be a end of the range, bottom third of the league type starting quarterback down the road. You guys mentioned Mond. He's probably the best of that group for sure. He was the senior and has a silky smooth release. Looks really good throwing the football. I like Kellen Mond if I'm going to pick one of them. Davis Mills is another guy that's going to be drafted, dual threat guy that came into college as the number one prospect in college football, according to some. He checks down too early at times, rarely throws receivers open, and doesn't have a lot of touch on his deep ball, but he lets plays develop from the pocket before getting outside the pocket. That's a positive thing with these dual threat guys. And he has pretty good arm strength, 4.59 40 40-yard dash as well. Or, 4.78 40-yard dash. So not just a statue in the pocket. So some guys to look for, certainly some elite talent guys in this class. Looking ahead to next season, we might not get this for a little while. Talking about 5 quarterbacks in the first round. So we should enjoy it while we can, Ryan.
Yeah, next year, not looking so good at quarterback and maybe some of the other positions as well. If you have to move those 2022 picks to move up and grab your guy in rookie drafts this year, go for it.
Exactly what I was thinking. Matt, overall, the class, it's fun to watch. There's going to be some stars out of this class, but there's the potential for a bust in every class. If you had to pick one of them guys, the guy that just isn't going to do what everybody expects him to do, who would that guy be for you?
You know who it is.
Well, you got to say it, bud.
It's Zach Wilson. I mean, like he could absolutely hit. I can absolutely see a scenario where he has a great NFL career. But I just think he, like Ryan said, they throw the word project around with Trey Lance. Like I personally think Zach Wilson is more of a project than Trey Lance. So
me too.
Yeah, so he would be my answer for that.
My takeaway from this class is Trey Lance is going to be a star. Like people are overlooking him. He is going to be so good. I can't wait to see him on an NFL field. We got to talk about the quarterbacks this week. Of course, we did the running backs last week, the wide receivers the week before. So if you missed those prospect primers, go back and check those out. Next week, guys, we'll be just a couple of days away from the NFL draft. So let's do the tight ends. Then let's do our last pre-NFL draft mock draft. We'll mix in some super flex action on this, maybe some tight end premium, try to really hit all bases before we get to the NFL draft. And then after the draft, we got to cover all these guys, their landing spots, and do more of those mocks that we love to do. So for Ryan and Matt, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening to this episode of the DLF Dynasty podcast. We'll catch you again next week.